All comfortable, all set? Welcome. 2025-26 annual plan workshop. It's an exciting update from Mr. Donnelly and his team, and a kick-off on the roadmap and showing us where we're at and where we're heading to before our February the 19th meeting, where we will approve a document to go out for consultation. It's the process that we're at, but I'll hand over to my very ready team at the head of the table, Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Rossler. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Look, I'll just jump in and give a very quick flyover of the roadmap. You've seen the slide before. Just quickly the key changes to it. We're a bit more definitive now around the consultation dates. You'll see in step 5, mid-March to mid-April. And you'll see step 4 being updated to reflect this workshop and leading into endorsement of the draft and giving direction to us to staff to consult. Probably the key, other than that, the other key thing to take out of the roadmap is just where we've come from, steps 1 through to 3, because they give you the context for really what we're doing here today. You've initiated the process. You've considered the year 2, the LTP, the work program, and you've considered changes to that program, and you've expressed comfort that those changes aren't significant under the LGA and under our Stimix engagement policy. And what that means in practice to you is that you have no new major proposals in front of you. You're getting on with what you agreed in your LTP, and that because of that direction you've, well, not direction, but that comfort that you've given under workshop 5 December, you've got more flexibility in how you communicate and engage with the public, and again, the steer that staff have taken from that is you're keen to offer a feedback process with the public. You want to stay connected and value that feedback. So that's the sort of program that we've shaped up in the background. So really that sets the context for the workshop today, which is just giving really a stock take of where we're at before we head into endorsing the draft position and the consultation narrative and approach that we take from the 19th to the public. So we'll kick off with Nick running through the financial side of it, and you had a consolidation back in December, and we'll recap on that and show you where that's sitting at the moment to give you confidence around that. And then the people will look at some of the revisits across the activities of the business. I think Nick's got some rating information too that he wants to kind of share. And then we'll have a look at the other substantive matter, which is the communications content and where that's at the moment. And again, giving us an opportunity for input before we land it to you at the meeting on the 19th. We will be looking for your endorsement around that. Just as background, there's some lesser matters that we won't discuss today, but will come in front of you at the 19th. When I say lesser matters, the change around these two things is minimal, albeit we need to get it in front of you formally. One's around fees and charges. There is some work going on there around some minor changes around fixed fees. That'll be coming in front of you on the 19th. And also there's some refinements to our measures and targets, which looks like improving and making them better, which is again reflecting feedback that we've been getting from both you and external audit through our current reporting process and through feedback there in the LTP. So there's about a dozen changes there we'll be bringing through, just so you're on top of it. And those things too, they'll be part of the annual plan detail that public can access if they so choose. So there's no questions around that. I'll just hand over to Nick and get cracking.
Comfortable? Thank you.
All right, well, we've just skipped on to slide 3, which was Mike's, but just this bit here, this excludes the comms bit that Mike mentioned when he was talking, and that's a separate set of slides which have already been circulated. But just this bit, we've got a refresh for you on the draft financial estimates. Just outline what we've done and revised post the last workshop, which was 5 December, and then just provide a little bit more detail on rates impact, including the difference between any of the districts. And we've just given an example of a couple of the districts, just to show that it's not going to be the same as what it was for this year's rates. So we haven't got a whole lot of detail on running it through the rates model, but we will provide that rates examples of specific properties for 2 weeks' time before the council meeting. So financial estimates. So
are there any valuation impacts? Are there any valuations GBs coming out?
There's yes, but we don't. They don't get done until July. Dunedin's due to be done in July this year.
Thank you.
So part of the issue that we have is that we'll have to do it based on
what we've got now,
and we get an equalisation percentage to run across, which hopefully will be what actually comes out. But you do get a timing difference. If you're doing work now, you actually set the rates resolution, and then by the time you do the actual strike, that's when the new valuations will be in. So you're trying to do all of that, get your equalisation, which is the estimate of that, correct. But there's always a few differences.
I couldn't remember if each TA gets done at the same time or they're not done at the same time and whatever, because that also skews it.
Yeah, and it's not helped by the fact that I actually think, just from memory, Queenstown was done in 2021, so that was before Dunedin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's overdue.
Yeah.
But it was out of cycle. It was late when it was done last time. So yeah, not ideal. So we've got financial estimates. So these slides are very similar to what you saw last time. Key change that we've done since the 5 December workshop. We went back through, had a look. There didn't change anything substantial. I.e. taking large amounts out of work programs. We did find there was an inflation formula for part of the transport spend and fares that wasn't picking up the inflation. So we had to adjust that. That actually increased the rates percentage slightly. But then what we've done is we've reduced inflation. So latest inflation numbers coming out, we're down at 2.2. We had inflation in for year 2 at 2.7. So we've decreased the inflation across everything to 2.2. So taking out that 0.5% inflation on all the costs, and you'll see the overall the impact of that. So
will that be reviewed again? I mean, the OCR coming out, I think, this week, aren't they? And they were suggesting that it was going to be a 1% drop, but they're suggesting it's going to be less of a decrease than they anticipated because of the global situation with tariffs and that sort of thing, and expected inflation in the world. So is it prudent to go to 2.2?
Well, that's what it was, and we sort of thought actually when we started running all of this, that was before the sort of noises come out that that in fact interest rates might not drop quite as much. But overall, I mean, we're just going with the latest number we've got. I mean,
it's easy to change, isn't it? It's just a variable. So.
Yep, absolutely. And if we go out and this is the draft position. You know, we've sort of finalised the numbers in May for you to approve in June. Yeah, if inflation in fact is, we're looking at continuing to drop to 2%, we could drop it some more. If it hasn't gone back up, we can look at what we do then. It's not overly difficult. So these next couple of slides have just given the revenue and rates or funding. Just pushed out to the side what the position was on 5 December in the last workshop. So if you remember, I left the notes there for 5 December because those notes, although the numbers won't tie up exactly, because now some of those numbers will have changed a little bit with inflation, it still gives you the key areas where we were like reducing OPEX. So in 5 December, we had a reduction in OPEX of 5.6 million. We've now got a reduction in OPEX of just over 6 million. So we've reduced OPEX a further $500,000 through that inflation adjustment of 0.5%. So as it's inflation, it's basically, it's a haircut across all of those line items. So if you look, you can see them all dropping slightly more than what they were. Yep. CapEx is decreasing slightly as well, which is what you'd expect with just a formula adjustment across the board. The impact then on funding. So previously 5 December, we got it down to an 8% rates increase, which is the one in red there. And now that's dropped to 7.8. As I said, there was actually some other changes that we made to some formulas as we were reviewing and realised we hadn't picked up some of the formulas. And in fact, so from December when we did that, the 8% would have increased a little bit, gone up to sort of, I think it went up to 8.2, maybe 8.3. And then the decrease in inflation has brought it back down under 8 to 7.8%. So probably nothing much there that you wouldn't be, that you'd be unfamiliar with. We then got we had this one last time, so I just updated it. It hasn't made a huge difference to the bottom line operating surplus. So that's largely still the same. We're generating a surplus. Obviously, part of that's driven by transport because we're rating to repay our deficits in transport. So that's one of the reasons why we've got a surplus. The rates increase. So we did a bit of a summary here just of what that 7.8% is made up of. And this isn't going through every activity, but it's cherry picking the ones with bigger dollar impacts. And then there will be other ones that are, ups and downs, of 100, 200 here and there. But that 5.064 million is our total rates increase. So that's a 7.8% rates increase. That number there, the 5.064, has inflation in it. I've then just put some comments outside of what makes that up, but only not accounting for the inflationary impact. So it's just the ones where we've got input increases, if you like, where we've added some OPEX spend or we've added an FTE to that particular area, or like one of the big one there, fourth down, biodiversity implementation. That's where we've added the $2 million for the large scale environmental fund. But if you add those up, you won't get exactly the number that's on the left, because the remainder is the inflation that's just washing through all of the costs that adds on to the baseline. But within there is some bigger items that do drive some of that spend. And as I said, probably the big ones which you're aware of, the $2 million environmental fund, largely off that one, or largely offsets, although dividend actually goes against general rate and biodiversity is catchment management rate. Dividends were going up, so that it decreases your rates impact. And the Whare Runaka rent is in there. but we'd reduced that from what was in year 2 of the LTP. That was one of the things we discussed in December. There's still an increase, but we've halved it on the basis that the handover date will be later in the year, as opposed to us being in there for the full year, which was the LTP assumption.
Kate,
So, sorry, just getting back up to speed, probably asking a really dumb question and you tell me I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm not wrong, that I just can't remember. Biodiversity implementation, you just said the $2 million, which is the new large scale environmental fund, is coming out of catchment,
Management rate. Yep.
but not necessarily delivered in the same model. So have we definitely made that decision?
I think in the December workshop, we put it up there. We'd had a discussion earlier about how we should fund it, because it was always in the LTP as a targeted rate. Yeah, but we hadn't defined what it would be. Yeah, and it was in year 2, so it's not like, yeah. So we said last time, said that we'd propose just to include it in the funded out of the catchment management rate. That rate that's been funded across the whole of the region.
Yep.
And although it was a workshop, so it obviously wasn't voted on or agreed, there was general sort of nodding. So, but what we'll do is when we come to adopting the draft, you can approve that that's how you want it to be.
So I think there's a paper coming to environmental implementation, which is looking at that large scale funding. And I'm just wondering, is that going to be in the scope, or is it just going to be how we allocate the funding? Because I think they're both cause and effect.
The intent of the paper is how we allocate the funding.
I'm just going to say that there could be a fraught problem there. How we do that if I'm just worried,
So the catchment management is rated across the region. It's effectively a general rate. It's just called catchment management as a targeted rate. So we're not blocking ourselves into any particular way of then allocating that funding. This you could absolutely decide to fund it another way. It's just that we set that catchment management rate up for those sort of activities. It doesn't separate it out by districts within the region. It's just applied. I mean, it's effectively a version of a general rate, and is separate to the paper that will be, or the workshop paper that will be coming to determine how we administer that fund.
Okay. Look, I'm sorry, and I now that you've said all that, you reminded me of us making that decision, but I do want to put just a question mark on that, because it is. There are some big groups already organised to apply for that, which may skew where it goes, and that may make it look more difficult. And I'm just saying that. I appreciate it's really hard.
I think that's the nub of the workshop is how are we going to administer that fund so it can be applied in the best way around the region and not set up in a way that might favour some groups over other groups. So you're still in complete control of how it gets allocated.
Sorry, I'm just getting up to speed on the stuff.
Gary.
Thanks. The drop in expenditure for the land and water plan implementation, which would be an impact on this year's expenditure. If that had been notified in October, then we would be underway with what I thought was somewhere $1 to $2 million of expenditure. Is that a note in the previous slide? 1.6 million, or
Which
we would have started implementation. Yes, I can't remember the number.
yeah,
And that's now obviously will effectively be a saving within this year.
yes, would be a saving for this year, but wouldn't it then become an expense for next year? Is there a factoring for that in here? Because I'm not seeing it on the expectation that a plan will be implemented.
I think, and I'll look to Joe, but I think we've got a line called land and water implementation. That's not land and water plan implementation. It's just a bigger piece of work. There was only a very small budget for actual plan implementation.
Yeah, there was. So it was land and water plan implementation was going to be part of the BAU work programs for consensus compliance and the environmental implementation teams. It was going to be prioritised accordingly. There was 50,000 this current financial year to set aside to look at options to support the implementation of the plan, and that hasn't been spent to date. And then it was just time and money, staff time in terms of year 2.
But we would have also had the process of the land and water plan and its formal process, which I thought was a big number on a previous slide that we just saw, that was highlighted as no longer.
So we're anticipating about $400,000 will be carrying forward for year 2 to offset the money that we won't be spending this year.
Right.
Land and water, so that hearings cost, so yeah.
Yeah, 403K. Yeah.
Hearings panel, we had budgeted for about $150,000, and then there's also additional legal and consultant spend that we won't be using, that we're gonna carry forward. I think it's about 400.
Yeah, there it is there on that expenditure. That's probably what you saw, Gary. So back in December, where we went through what the adjustments were to what we had assumed in the LTP, Land and Water Regional Plan, was actually what we've got in year 2 now.
Yep.
Is we've got an increase of 400K. It'll roughly be still about that number. But that actually won't be having a rates impact, because we've got an assumption that we're going to be underspent this year. So we'll just carry that funding through. So effectively we'll reserve fund that increase next year. So there won't be an additional rates impact.
But we've got a 400K, a 165K plus a 1.7 mil amount there, all under the banner of Land and Water Regional Plan.
No, that's
That is a difference.
that's not Land and Water Regional Plan.
Should be 3 different bullet points there.
Yeah, it's 3
Yeah.
bullet points,
It's
sorry,
actually
it's
three-
not,
three bullet
3
points.
topics under the land and water plan.
Yeah. So it
environmental
will be
implementation is not 1.7,
Right.
science and EM has dropped 165, and the land and water regional plan programs dropped 403. They're three different
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
and that's all in that land and water line. So it's not, but the bottom 2, science and implementation, are not just regional plan related. That's normal work program.
Can I just speak to that quickly, because it is going to be relevant when we bring the finance reports through. So because we have deliberately not rated for some things in year 2 that we know we're not spending this year. So when we report in February and we are forecasting a surplus at year end, some of that is already allocated. Some of that surplus is effectively already allocated in year 2. So we've just got to be conscious of that. That it's not fat in the budget, if you like, that we could reallocate to something else this year, because we've
Already gathered.
already
Yeah.
planning to spend it next year, so we don't have to rate for it. Yeah, so it's just, and that'll come through in the finance reports.
So we're not finding ourselves in a predicament where we had, from the LTP, we haven't gathered in funds that we haven't spent, but we are still, because we're only a minute amount away from where we had initially said our year 2 LTP was going to be. We aren't in a position where we've gathered funds and then we're gathering still again. But we've actually haven't done the work. We're not in that position with what we're forecasting now.
No.
No,
What we're, like Richard said, what we're doing is we're forecasting that we're not going to spend the money in this financial year. That'll come through in the finance committee in our Q2 with our forecast. And then what we're doing is we're saying, well, that'll go to reserves. We've added the spend back into year 2. But what we've said is we're not going to rate for it in year 2. We'll just take it out of the reserve because we've already rated for it in year 1.
Okay.
Yep.
No, that's confirming that. Thank you.
yeah, and the other thing to note too, the land and water implementation, so post notification implementation wasn't budgeted this year, so Joe was looking after it, we didn't have budget for it, we were gonna have to manage within existing budgets or request an overspend. We haven't budgeted for it next year, so there's no assumption that there's gonna be notification in 25-26, and therefore we'll roll straight into a implementation plan. If we get to a point where council chooses to notify, then we would effectively roll the same process out again and come and have a conversation about costs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Any further? No, good. Move on.
Okay, so that's put a breakdown on the rates increase. Then you got district overview, and I only did Queenstown and Dunedin just because it was easier to do. As I said, we're in the process of running everything through the rates model. But this just gives a bit of a high level overview. So if you look at Queenstown on the left, it's got what the annual plan and therefore actual rates were for 23-24. Second column is what we rated in 24-25 LTP. So that's year one, that's the year that we just rated. And then if you look in that middle column, you can see the what that means for the rates increase. So you can see there with Queenstown, excluding PT, their rates were going up roughly about 35%. If they, including PT, because there was a big increase in their PT rates to one, fully fund all of their current expenditure, plus they also had a deficit to deal with. And that's bigger than what the percentage increase was for Dunedin, because Dunedin was already a lot closer to fully funding its operational expenditure. But if you're in the PT zone, you were probably in the 40% range for your rates increase. And that's probably consistent with what people were contacting us and councillors about and going, my rates have gone up 30 to 40%. Now, you can see there that the general rate was 24%. Biosecurity, which is also, it's on value, it's on land value, that was 11, almost 12%. Catchment management hasn't got a percentage because it didn't exist the year before, but that was also that's a capital value based rate. Now that has an impact, because what happened also at the same time as we moved all the rates, you can see that bottom line share of the CV base. So Queenstown's share of the capital base increased from 42.4 to 46.6%. So their capital values went up, whereas other districts, of which if you go over to that line in Dunedin, their capital value, percentage of the capital value base went down. And that's just the nature of it. Queenstown was unusual as probably one of the few areas of the country where they continued to enjoy property value increases, and everybody else stagnated and were either very small, flat, or went backwards. So then so if you compare that to the Dunedin, those columns, you can see Dunedin's overall, or the average including PT, was 6.9. But their percentages, particularly across those capital value ones, were much lower. There was also the thing in there that you could see prior to the changes, we were using general, district general rates. We removed those, and now general is just general across the whole district. So again, that moved a bit of it, and we added into the general. We had a general rate allocation for transport and the general rate allocations for things for the flood and drainage, increased slightly to that standard 20%. So then on the right-hand side, if you actually have a look, based on using the same percentage as what we've currently got, so that's 46.6% for Queenstown and 29.2% for Dunedin, you'd see if those things remained equal, their general rates, biosecurity, catchment management, those percentages and the uniform ones of CDM and Wildings will be identical. It will differ then in those other ones that are more targeted and they're more district specific, like river management or public transport. But overall, you can see the percentage there that we'd be looking at is around about 8.9 for Queenstown and 6.7 for Dunedin. Although that's equal, and it's applying the same, the reason why it's slightly different is because Queenstown still gets that bigger percentage of the capital base, and there is more capital. There's a lot of capital value based rates. The bit that we've still got to wait and see when rates finally come out, that 46.6 and the 29.2 may differ, and then that will move the percentages.
Can I just ask a really silly question? And it comes down to the fairness of a regional centre like Dunedin, which has a high capital value that isn't rated compared to, say, Queenstown. So the CV number we've got on here excludes the hospital, university, and that sort of thing, or does it include it and it's zeroed later on?
The CV here is just rateable.
Right.
Just rateable.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thought as to the fairness of allocation if it did by capital value of the whole city and then discounted it, would it look like differently?
But they're still not gonna pay you money though, that's the problem.
Yeah,
You've got to do it on your, you need to do it on the people that are paying you the rates, because if you count properties that you're not going to collect from, no matter what formula you use, it's still, you're not going to get any money from them. So they can't be included. They should be, but
No, so the benefit of those services don't necessarily go right out to Queenstown though, for economic returns, and I'm just thinking about the fairness of it, I just thinking about that. I mean, Dock Reserve doesn't quite add the same value necessarily, but I just.
it's not a perfect system.
yeah.
This.
Yes, yes, Tim.
So, I mean, we're constricted by the way we, the formula that we use for rates, aren't we? I mean, it seems to me that, yeah, just looking at it, it looks a bit unfair, but there's nothing we can do about this. Because, well, we have to use this format.
Well, there is the biggest way to, well, there's two sort of, well, probably multiple ways to do it. Some councils might choose to use more targeted rates. So we're going to take this particular activity, target it at smaller, at districts or smaller areas, or use differentials. We're only going to apply this to residential property or commercial property or rural property, or a combination, or you use fixed charges. Because of course, if you've got, so if you've, people who have, or areas like Queenstown that have high value properties would prefer a system that uses a lot of uniform charges, because it'll bring their costs down. So, and we debated the uniform charge, but the other ones are getting more into, if you want to look at pulling stuff out and having targeted rates or differentials, we need to do some more work on that. Because that gets a lot more complicated, and you've got to do a lot more analysis. Having the uniform charge at a certain percentage, it's easy. You can just pick a different percentage. You've got to map uniform rates, and by uniform they mean every single property in Otago. So even if we've got a rate that is uniform but only applies to Dunedin, then it's not actually uniform. But it's because it's specific to a smaller portion. But you can only have 30% of your total rates can be uniform. So that's your cap.
What are we at the moment?
Well, we do 25% of the general rate.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, but I think it was certainly down. It might have been a bit under 20% of our total. And it might have dropped a little bit more. It might now be sort of more like 18, 19.
It's interesting when it comes to representation.
Lloyd,
Yes, for a question, I guess. So we've already decided in our long-term plan, our rating, how we collect our funds and how we distribute doing it. So,
Yeah.
I assume that's how. So this is how this is put together.
Yeah.
It would be. You wouldn't anticipate any changes to that model.
Well, we went through the whole review of, of our revenue and financing policy. We went through that funding needs analysis to look at all of that. So we've done all of that. I mean, what we saw in the current year that we've just rated is you saw the impact of making a multiple rating changes. Yeah, and particularly moving to, so everything moved around, and a lot of it moved to like catchment management, for example, went region wide, capital value based. So it has that impact on higher capital value properties. At the same time, it was sort of exacerbated by an unusual national valuation impact that was property reval that was going on. And that it's unusual that here we are, usually our districts are all moving in the same direction. Probably not to the same extent. Queenstown's always been increasing more than the others, but the others are usually been increasing as well. Whereas we had the opposite going on. One went up, others went down. We also had in the mix that two of the districts, Clutha and Waitaki, they got actual revals, and their property valuations for those areas went down. We also had the property revals for actuals, rural property decreased. So there was a lot going on in the reval mix as well that hit at the same time as we were changing the formula.
Yes, I guess I don't feel now's the time to relitigate our systems. We've got what we've got.
Yep.
I actually totally agree that no one wants to revisit them, but we did start revisiting them last long-term plan, and we decided, I think, and I may be wrong, not to do the Clutha one, because Stephen Hill did a very good submission to us. And I've been talking to Tom about this. There's obviously some other issues that have happened since our 5th of December meeting, which makes us slightly concerned about that one, how it's working. I'm just wondering, and there isn't time to do the review for the annual plan, but should we be saying that that is a process that we're going to work through?
So there's already a resolution from the long-term plan, and it didn't require it by the annual plan, so it's work in progress. And Tom and Nick have started that conversation about how we pull those reviews of the various flood and drainage schemes together, and Transport's the other one that had a resolution, so it doesn't need another one. We're already committed to doing it. What we need to do is report back to council on what the timeframe for that process is going to be.
Yeah.
And the only other thing we talked about is not doing it as part of an annual plan or long-term plan process, actually do a specific piece on rates, consult with the relevant people, go through all of the decision making, and then bring it forward because it just became quite messy in the annual plan, combining work program with rates. But it doesn't need another resolution.
No, and I don't want another resolution. I think it would be really helpful if we get that time frame and stuff reported to us before we do any consultation, in order that we can then put just a brief paragraph that this is out of, we don't want submissions on this, but it will be a separate process, because I think there is some piqued interest in this now from that work, and we should just direct it to some other.
Show that it's happening.
It is happening.
Yeah. Well, you could, Kate. Yeah.
What you're saying, Kate, is in our media that we flag that some areas again going to be reviewed. Yeah,
They're subject to a different review process rather than the annual plan. Yeah.
Specific.
It
specifically address it, and that just
criteria.
gets rid of that.
Come forward. Good. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, but what this slide was trying to show is what happened this year, and what will, all things being equal, will happen when we rate next year or later this year. And we shouldn't see the same variation that we did in the year that just went, because it was a one-off due to the review and what happened with the valuations. There'll always be some differences. That always happens, and the rates database is always moving. New properties are coming on stream. So it's never ever going to be that all districts will be identical. But what we see there is more. That's typically what we see historically, is that they're within Kui, and that's what we're seeing here.
But we'll also just be conscious of in our comms, they will still report on fund number, but we'll make sure that our communications are very clear that we'll have an average, but there will be differences in the districts and that we'll know, we'll be able to say what they're likely to be.
It seems like the middle ground is gonna be there in you've got Queenstown Lakes District at 8.9. Dunedin 6.7, so the other ones are gonna be in between, eh?
Well,
Not
I haven't
necessarily.
looked at the other ones, but.
You
yeah,
get
they
to your
could be.
average 7.8 or whatever it was.
And then the next set of slides, just these are sort of basically the tables that'll go into the annual plan document itself, without the column, the variance column. But for each of the group activities, we always just show this level of detail, which is the activity spend, and then what it's broken down, how it's funded for each of those activities. So you can compare there. Out on the left-hand side is year one of the LTP that we've just done and just rated for, then got year two of the LTP versus what we've got in the annual plan now, and the annual plan column, and then we've got what the movement is. So regional leadership has got some increases in expenditure, and then most of the rest of them environment. Decreasing expenditure and funding versus when you're comparing LTP year two to the annual plan. Safety and resilience. Transport. Now, usually transport we just show as total transport, but for this one here, I have split down the expenditure into the networks and regional transport planning. But again, this is one where of our $6 million decrease in operating expenditure to what was in year two of the LTP.
Yeah.
This is the biggest area where most of it is decreasing, and we went through that. A lot of that is due to the various programs that we've amended due to
Co-funding.
Waka Kotahi funding not coming through. But we went through those and worked through what we were going to leave in and still fund ourselves. And then last one is just internal, not a huge amount of change there. So that was just those last few. We knew you didn't get that view in December, but just put it there because that's sort of the view of how it will flow through into the group activities in the annual plan document, and then beyond there, all the financials that are in the annual plan document are very financial statements. They're for us accountants, Tim.
Could you just flick back to that last slide? Sorry. The 2 million in 22, that's for the deficit recovery, is it? Is that what we see there?
The
Reserves.
It's under revenue reserves 2022. And
Oh, yeah.
brackets, that's the deficit recovery, is it? That we're seeing for transport.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, or it'll be. Yeah, I'll just have to go and double check, but that's where it should be.
Yeah, because you might be putting stuff on there to have
I'd thought
have it that way. Yeah.
in the line above, under expenditure, but that's
So
that's
negative
right.
expe-
That's the
yeah.
same
No,
thing.
because what we'll be doing is we will be rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then some of that rates won't be funding operating expenditure. It'll be going as a credit into reserves to repay.
repay the deficit.
Yep.
Yeah, you're creating a reserve. Yeah,
Thanks.
where it goes. Yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
under the regional leadership. There's the governance and community engagement. I think you covered this, but I'm slightly lost. You've got a huge percentage increase already in the long-term plan from 13.3 to 15.1.
Mhm.
And then it's going up again, which makes the jump between years not quite substantial. What is driving that? What did you say? I think you said something about it earlier.
No, I haven't noted that down, but if you went back to stop sharing and found December. I'll share this one. This was the December.
We all have that, we just can't get it back out. quick enough.
Sorry.
If you remember this, so this was the December workshop, we went through what, so you can see there were those movements, the increases in the expenditure. Now, it will have changed slightly. Because what, have you got the, you got?
Oh, that's the three parts, isn't
Go
it?
down.
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
This
So-
is just on the top one.
Yeah, so at the moment, so what we've got there is you could see this one here. In December,
There's
we
a
had
million there.
governance and community it was going up versus year two, 422. Now it's going up 388 in the one that the previous slide that I was in.
Mhm.
So that difference is is inflation, why it's slightly lower now. But we went through each area
Yeah.
in December and we went, okay, regional leadership, governance. And so we said, here were the key things. And so governance and democracy was going up. You can see there, public awareness going down 100. We were going up about 440, which was included insurance and legal and the new org structure. Yeah. So, and that's sort of on that other slide, whatever number slide that is in the slide pack. But if you wanted like that one, and then regional planning and regulatory, like regulatory was going up a bit as well. And that
Okay.
was, you can see there, it's those two there was some OPEX decreasing as freshwater farm plans came out, but there was a transfer of some FTE from environmental implementation. So where you saw those increases on that other, in the slide pack that we just went through,
Mhm.
those ones there, you're going, why was that going up? That's what we had in the workshop in December.
And maybe I'm just concerned because I'm governance part, and people just think that we've all been paid more, or something where our costs have gone up. And it's just an interesting line because that one has had a substantial increase, and there's definitely a story to tell why. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, governance and democracy has now got, although we call it that heading, it's got more in there because, we've put in sort of, we've put in more of the executive and operational
Trying to capture
leadership,
the
if
costs
you like.
where they fit rather than just spreading them
Yeah.
across the organisation
Yeah.
where you can't see them.
Yeah.
So that includes the ELT costs as well.
It's all right.
Yeah, that's
I just
good.
thought we haven't put in there, but it's just worth touching, as we did talk in December about staff. So just trying to find the sides that so 24, 25, we had 359.3, and that was going up to 378.1, but we've kept that, and there is a proposal to add 2, but we've removed the balance of those additional roles,
The 361.
361.
0.2.
3.
Didn't you listen?
Yeah, no, I need the point. But yeah.
So that was some work that the GMs did with managers, just to have a look at where can we utilise what is, we've got a good resource base to work from now, and just being a little bit more, a little bit smarter in our work planning and more efficient with process and using those staff and prioritising it across the business rather than continuing to add staff every year.
Yep.
So there is still a job for us we haven't just pushed those roles out, we've just removed them. There's still a small jump forecast in year 3, but we'll go through the same exercise again next year, and make sure that we are that we're confident that those roles are required to deliver the program that we've committed to.
Good, Nick. Further questions? So Nick, can you forward these to us, plus all that to us so we can have a,
Just come to us.
is it good? God, it's sharp. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So we can all have a look at in our own time. Should be good. And if there are any questions, don't hesitate to bring co-chair of finance and direct any inquiries to Mr. Donnelly and the team. Mr. Kelleher?
Are we still open for questions?
Absolutely.
Right, Richard, those numbers, the staff numbers, so you're saying that your revised number is of 361.2, did I get that right?
Yeah.
So you're saying that that is basically, you view that as equilibrium of the organisation from now on, that those permanent roles, that's where the organisation needs to sit from a permanent role perspective into the future.
No, what we're saying is that based on the work program we're being asked to deliver, we think we can do it with that number and then just being smart with use of consultants where it's required or fixed term roles, but we don't need to keep committing to adding permanent employees to the organisation. If there's a substantial shift around the table in terms of what you're asking us to do, we would need to have a look at whether that's adequate, too many, or not enough. But at the moment, as it stands, we're comfortable we can deliver for that, as well as smart use of consultants where it makes sense and fixed term employees where it makes sense for projects.
So the work program and what part, or is all of the work program work we will undertake forever into the future? Or are there parts of that that are shorter term projects that more FTEs have been sourced for a shorter term project, say, whether it's IT?
Yeah, combination. I mean, some of our work is ongoing, environmental monitoring work, the science program will be ongoing. And then some of it, so resources to assist to deliver wharenaka, for example, it might be something where you're looking at obviously a defined period of time and then no need. Certain IT projects where we're delivering a new regulatory system or a CRM system, we talked about it this morning, but so there's some specific projects. Obviously within policy, we have, almost a rotating, new regional plans to write. So we were land and water, we've moved on to air, land and water will come back on, coast's got to start. So it's an assessment that needs to constantly be made. And part of that's the recruitment process as well. So when we have a vacancy arise, actually rather than just hitting go on a recruitment campaign to recruit the same role, actually assessing, is that role still required exactly as it has been in the past? Is it better utilised somewhere else in the organisation, or can we just hold it open for a period of time as we no longer need it?
Right. So the comment you made just previously was, I think, was it 378? Was in a perfect world, if you could have every part your way, 378 would have been the number. But
that was what was forecast back at LTP.
Yeah.
So when those work programs were created, and there was a wish list of, that this is the number of staff. That was what was included in the LTP. I guess the view of ELT now is we don't need all of them.
right. But so really what you're saying is that this is an organisation for this foreseeable future is going to be sitting around that 360
That's my view.
FTE. That's
Yeah.
your view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Gary. Further questions, information required? Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Thank you, Mr. Rossler. Yes. We're going to, on the same page, on the same part, diligent, and it will be 1, 2, is it? Apologies, mine just locked out.
Sorry, we'll just bring up the PowerPoint.
Mhm. So it's Amanda, Mike, mine's drawn a blank, and Joe. Introductions, please. I'm sorry, I'm just.
It's all right. I'm Sarah Bedford from the comms team.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you. Who's leading this, Amanda?
Right, we've just. Perfect. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Joe, who will lead us through the comms approach for the annual plan 25-26. Mike's also here to answer questions if you have them related to the corporate planning part of it. The material was circulated on Friday afternoon, so hopefully you've had a chance to look through to it. But I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you. So in terms of a comms approach, we're suggesting that it's a proactive approach to invite community feedback as part of the commitment that we have to meaningful engagement. So you guys, I believe, discussed that in December at the workshop at the time. So while there is no requirement to consult on the annual plan, we have proposed excuse me, that there is still an open feedback question in there. Also that Te Matapuna, the same approach that we did for long-term plan, that Te Matapuna, our ratepayer newsletter, is also that key messaging vehicle for the community. Suggesting a digital approach, so the website would be the key place for people to give their feedback. There will be options available as well for people who are don't have the ability to get online to give their feedback. We'll be supporting the campaign with social media, traditional media, and other advertising. There's a 30-day feedback period suggested. And the feedback will be reported back to council. So this is the thinking around key messaging. So again, some of that reflecting back to the long-term plan message, which was around building a stronger future for Otago. It's also an opportunity for us to highlight the work that we're doing as OIC, our work programs, talking about where funding comes from and where that funding is spent, what key changes there are from the long-term plan. Also highlighting the rates estimator again, so people can go and find out at an individual level what's proposed and what the impact would be for them for their own rates. You can just see at the bottom there, if you haven't already seen it in the notes, what we would be suggesting in terms of an open feedback question. So I guess at this point also just seeking some direction from you around any editorial things that you think we should be revisiting. The draft content for Te Matapuna has been circulated. That includes everything except the finance information at this point. And whether there's anything else around that consultation plan that you think that we should be looking at.
Okay. Look, depending on how we message this, if we saw if I was Joe Bloggs and got presented the slides we've all just seen with 27% increases on your rate because of the catchment benefit funds, I think a lot of people will focus on that and be quite negative. And I think what we need to message in there that we actually consulted last year on this, and that and we gave several choices, and this is what the community said, and we made that decision on that basis. because it will be really easy for people, there's two parts to this part, because I'm not quite sure that we're going to be able to deliver by the 1st of July, in which case whether it should be part funding, but I think people, it's easy to take that sort of thing and focus on that and be negative about it. Whereas if we don't have the right story there saying, actually, we've already consulted on this is why it is in there, and we've got resounding support for it, I just don't want to litigate some of that consultation. I think that's going to be quite nuanced. But maybe you've already got that covered. And I haven't read everything.
I was just about to say, Kate, did you have a chance to look at how the
No.
draft messaging has framed up?
I read the start of it and I'm sorry, I forgot all about it being there.
No, that's all right, but I guess it would be helpful for the team because they have messaged,
Okay,
I'll
okay.
just pull it up, they have messaged that, so in terms of the environment piece.
I did start reading it, I'm sorry.
Hopefully
the new
ratepayers
fund-
will see it, yeah.
Just in that para 1, 2, 3, 4, the new fund is the result of the long-term plan process in 2024 and helps to fill a gap in government funding for important large-scale environmental work. To pay for this fund, ratepayers will see an increase in their catchment management rate. So I guess if there's time to continue to reflect on that, but just some feedback to the staff on whether that is the right direction, that's enough, or whether you want something more, or what that might look like in terms of specifics would be really helpful.
Well, yeah, it's not just about filling government gaps either, because it may be new initiatives. I don't want it just been going to fill in government gaps, because that wasn't every part of it.
Yeah, and I guess this messaging isn't the messaging around
Yeah.
what that fund will do.
Yeah,
That will
yeah.
come through the work that Jo and her team are doing. This is really talking to the community about why they'll see an increase.
Thank you,
And
sorry, I've forgotten about going back to that.
Gary, then Richard.
Thank you. So we're going to, in the newsletter, we're going to show them the impact on rates. So they're going to show them a number. Now, is that number going to be Otago's average, or is it going to be the average for the specific region that it has been sent to, because we have quite defined regional boundaries? And then alongside that, are we going to show a range?
So the intention, I think, obviously we haven't written that content for finance yet, but it would be to show examples for different areas within Otago. So I think Nick had mentioned maybe examples for different TLA areas. So example for Clutha at a particular value, same for each of the other TLA areas. Yeah, and then also pushing them back to that rates estimator so people can see their own as well.
Right. For people who aren't online, for them to be able to get a rates estimate, are they able to ring in, give their property, and staff provide it for them?
Yeah, so part of the messaging within Te Mata Puna would be that if you don't have ability to get online and find out more or give you feedback, to give us a call and we can provide information for people.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you.
And that would extend to if someone rang up and said, I'd like a hard copy of the material sent to my address, we would facilitate that.
Right.
We don't want to disadvantage people online
No.
and don't have access to online.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Richard.
Yeah, back to the point around what are we trying to do with the large scale funding? And yeah, I don't think saying that we're filling a gap in government funding is a good way of, it's just not good. That isn't what we do. That isn't what we're aiming for. We are trying to be effective in what we're delivering and efficient. And we feel that that is the harnessing this and supporting the real difference only community-driven initiatives can achieve is really it. That's why we're doing it. They can achieve in-kind ratios, they can access private land, they've got expertise and they've got community drive. That's why we're not doing it to fill a gap. So we might as well say why we're doing it, that we think that's the way forward.
Just
Yep.
just in regards to Te Mata Puna, is this a special edition or is it part of our regular?
We usually would have one around this time of year, but this will be a special issue dedicated to annual plan.
So there'll be no other news in it apart from the rate, the annual plan.
Just the annual plan.
Yeah, yeah. Just another question. So how many, so to Market Permanent is a regular quarterly newsletter, is it? Or, so it goes out every quarter?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Further?
What else did we read?
Well, I've read a lot.
It started off from.
I guess from a process perspective, because this is, the team have worked really hard to get this to you early in the piece. So there's still another, obviously council on the 19th of February as well will be seeking approval to move forward. So really in the next week or week and a half, if you've got further feedback as you work through it, you're welcome to email that through to the team and we can incorporate that. We do want to make sure you're comfortable with the way it's pitched and the way the messaging is being delivered.
Boyd?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I've had a bit of a read and stuff, but it's like there's information in there, but I quite like pictures, graphs. So I assume there'll be a bit of that come through with the more of the financial stuff like percentages and circles and that sort of stuff. Not just all reading.
Yeah, that's the intention. That would sit within that finance placeholder
Yeah.
area.
So there's just sort of the writing around it. So you're talking like a four-page tomato.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And it will look beautiful.
Oh, beautiful, I'm sure.
This was the content, trying to focus on the words and the messaging to make sure that that's pitched at the right level. It will obviously look amazing because the team make it look really good before it goes out.
Yeah, because I think it's really, people won't, I feel, well, I suppose I'm talking for myself. Some people have quite short attention spans, so they'll flick and it'll get something's going to take their eye, and it's probably not going to be words. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, one thing we've always talked about that the big fund was that yes, we were going to rate initially for it, but one of the drivers behind it was that we were actually going to explore the options of both private and public funding and to support that fund. So I just wonder if we can mention that somewhere, because I think it's quite, well, initially they can just see this drain going all the time and it's going to go up and up and up.
So we can't sort of preempt the direction that council needs to give us through the workshops and the development, which is what Joe and the team will be coming to talk to you about. So absolutely, the intent is always, can we grow this into something that is either self-sustaining or has, seed funding from ORC and the opportunities through the port and through other private investors. I think that before we have properly considered the direction you want us to take and develop that a little bit further, we just caution putting that into a document like this.
Yeah, good.
But it's very much on the cards in terms of what the discussion you'll be having with Joe and Libby and co. So
Yeah, cool. Yeah, good job.
Just gonna say, if people think that the chairperson's board should change as well, go for it, I reckon, because it's right at the front, and if we can do it better, then do feel free to, not wed to it, so, It's a tool for us all to use, and even if I don't know, we don't need to have a chairperson's board even, could just have an intro from the council, I don't mind,
Read all right.
Yeah.
It is quite nice to put a voice and a face to it though.
Okay.
So that everyone, it'll be good.
Yeah. That's good. Kate?
Your comments in a small message for Jo in her report is, the question is, if we are looking at co-funding, at what level? Because often with those sort of funds, people will say, we want you to, if you're Mr. Zero and jury and you want to invest in something, do you do it at a great level at the ORC level, or are you better because you live in Queenstown giving it to that as co-funding? So we may be driving people to get co-funding from our funds, and so we have to be really careful how we message. Do we want investment at a target-wide level with us, which is in many ways more effective, but it will be dispersed, and yet still expect co-funders to come in at that other level, and that's a really difficult thing to message.
it's the conversation you'll be having at that workshop.
Yeah, as long as
There's
it's,
pros and cons to all of it.
All of that will come through at that workshop,
I presume
Thank you.
well
Well
done,
done.
thanks.
Good. Carry on. Table's clear.
Finished.
Comfortable?
Perfect. So yes, just in terms of next steps, we will, yeah, at the next week or so, if you have another reread of it and think you'd like to provide some feedback, please feel free to email that in. We will then, the team will be working with Nick and the team to get the finance messaging sorted, and then we'll recirculate a designed draft before the 19th for you to look at. Yeah. And I guess that goes for the consultation, the communication approach as well. If you had any other thinking about what's been proposed, let us know. Otherwise, we'll keep working.
So Joe, how well read is the current document that we send out, and what can we do to ensure that people know that this is the annual plan and it has even more significance than the current document we send out?
You mean then the actual
Challenge.
annual plan itself?
No, then, so this is Te Mata Puna is a specific one we're sending
I
out
see
just
what
for
you're
annual
saying,
plan, so
Yeah.
normally turns up, and I do read it, but I know a lot of people don't read it. So what can we do within, and I tell them to read it, then they read it, so well, that wasn't bad. So what can we do, what can we do within this document or in our packaging to ensure we get a greater impact? That's your challenge, I suppose.
Yeah,
as
that's
the
right,
expert.
and we would use our usual techniques, which is a really good headlines, really good writing and images, and trying to draw people to the document. But yeah, I mean that's the best we can do. But we also we'll have an online version of it, and also some web content as well. And good graphics, good images, good headlines are always that's the way to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, can we do something to the envelope?
To the envelope.
Yeah, annual plan. I just.
Doesn't come, it's just a.
No, it doesn't, no, it just goes out, it's just doesn't.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
So it's an electronic version as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
And I think, there's a role there for you as governors. We will circulate it to, the various contacts aware, but there's a role, you have direct links into community, into groups and communities, and can get that sort of material out as well. So, taking some ownership of ensuring that you encourage people through that electronic link through emails to read it, is a good way of just getting the spread a little bit further as well. I'd say between the 11 of you and your various contact lists, you would have quite wide reach around Otago to be able to actually just distribute it by email and make the point this is, contains the annual plan information that would be well worth reading. And contacting us if they choose to.
good point, Richard. Yeah, all good. Kate,
On the chairperson's report, because she asked us, on the last line I put, we look forward to hearing from you. Or we all look forward to hearing from you. I'm slightly concerned reading this document, and I'm just taking a critical, not adversarial, critical look and thinking, if I were reading these headings, will they make me read them? If I live in the Catlins, I won't bother reading public transport, seriously. It's just not going to get me there. Caring for the Otago's community, I actually think that's where the investment is. And instead of caring, which is a nice, comfortable word, but actually we're investing. That's what the difference is. We've always cared for the environment, I think. This is about investment. I think public transport's fine. And so I'm just trying to make sure that people feel like it's relevant to their part. And it's really easy with buses. We know that it's going to be Dunedin and Queenstown might read that, the rest just won't. And so and the flood protection works again, that will be the Clutha and the Tari people will read that, and maybe a few of the other areas, but not greatly. And I just want to make sure that we capture it. And that's so what I'm going to suggest, and we being Otago Regional or Otago play an important part in caring for, I'd say you play. And it's just that nuance, and this is your way of investing more collectively. And I just really targeted the people. It's feeling like they own it. And this is, it's very cost as coming out of their money, out of their pockets. And I just think that that's the way that you're going to get them to actually see that it does affect them.
That's good direction, Kate, and that's what we try to achieve with it. This is just a draft, and we can change those headings.
I'm just trying to get people to read it, because there's no area specific or nothing in there, and I'm not saying that that's easy to do, but
yeah,
No,
It's-
true, yeah.
It's what's relevant.
We
to you.
can fiddle with the headings, we can change the copy, we can do whatever we want to at this point.
Yeah.
It's all a draft. Then the other thing too, we're thinking about is that all of the advertising and promotion that we do will also drive people's interest in reading it as well.
Yeah.
So we need to remember that the money that we put in behind the promotional work for this document
Yeah.
and for this annual plan will also help to generate interest in it.
Gary?
Thanks. So just to clarify that I'm right in what I'm reading here, that we will be sending a hard copy in an envelope to every property in Otago as we would do with our rates.
No envelope.
So it's not enveloped, it's sent just as a A4, usually trifold. It goes to 94,000, well, we print 94,351 copies. So it goes to, depending on where you live in Otago and how you get your mail, it'll go to a letterbox, a PO box, and in some places it goes to outlets at like the local store for people to pick up.
Right. Yeah, so we are well covering basically whether you are technology savvy or not.
Yeah.
As quite a few of my constituents aren't, so they have an avenue too. Okay,
Yeah.
cool, thank you.
And just to clarify as well, we can't use the rating database, so it's not like sending out the rates. So we need to rely on a different method, which is the rural delivery and also city delivery, the same as you might get your community newspaper or the like. So we can't actually directly mail ratepayers with this.
Is there, what's the reason for that?
That's our advice from the finance team.
It's just the law around the rates database and what you're allowed to use it for. It's quite heavily constrained. It's a funny one.
I think it would be inappropriate to use the rates database because this is for all residents of Otago, whether they're ratepayers or not. So that's good, it's going to everyone.
Good we can. We have this, and Gary, you might recall, we do have the discussion most years around are we using an addressed envelope, even, to the householder, even if it's not the rates database, the cost of that is significant. And so now we have an avenue through Te Matapuna where the delivery has been, and we also had an issue one year where we tried delivering and half of them didn't show up. I think it was in Michael's area, so we, in the Cromwell area that was, unfortunately. But we have now got confidence in the delivery of Te Matapuna. It's got good coverage. It's starting, there's brand awareness there, so people are picking it up and we're getting feedback. So it's just trying to build on that and keep the costs down of going down that path of deliberately trying to get one in an envelope in every mailbox in the region.
Cool. Richard?
Do we put them in the mailboxes that say no circulars anyway? I think we might.
Yeah, I believe that doesn't actually apply to us in terms of where council, it's not advertising material.
Yeah.
Sarah? How are we shaping up? You right there, Elliot's all good at the stage? Good. Comfortable? Start taking good photos.
This is more.
Is that you finished? All right, the team is leaving. I've still got the CE with me. If there's any further questions on this process that we have. We've got the key date that we have is, the key date we have is the 19th of February. Is when we approve our annual plan for consultation. And the purpose of today was to have that brief overview of where the financials have got since our workshop in December. So we've had a review of that and we'll get that next now posted that on Diligent. So go back through that and have a check. Any further questions, come back to us and make them known ASAP. We've now seen what I believe is a very good consultation process. We've got the basic drafts of that. We're going to go and refine that now and get that to its best advantage to go out to our people. We know through the Act that we have made no significant changes, so this is more an informative session as opposed to a straight consultation. So we've passed all those tests, and look, just please feedback on reading all these documents and checking what we've said today. Just please get your feedback through, because on February the 19th, we want to ensure that we haven't got a pothole on our roadway to getting this plan out there in action. So is there any further questions at this stage? If not, I thank the team, Nick's team and Amanda's team and everyone else for the work they've done to date. And those who wish to get your feedback in, or just get on the phone, give us a yell, and we can have a chat about it. And we will close this meeting before we're meant to start. Good, just about.
The Caribbeans.
Yeah, I'm gonna close because we did not
Oh,
start.
Yeah, you can.
so-
Yep.
Yeah, but maybe we should.
Oh, if you want to, go for
Yeah,
it.
tau te rangamari, ki runga i nei, we will te ao.
Yep.
Thank you.